Okay, I thought I will just start the recording as well at this point with the consent of everybody around so that everybody gets the benefit of this session even after the session is over. Dr. Sonal Modi, she is the Vice President L&D at Mastercard. Again, very tenured, seasoned professional, 25 years in the industry, looking at talent development, transformational initiatives, being involved in mergers and acquisitions, a whole host of things that she's actually done. And it was very interesting to connect with her in terms of what her perspective was around coaching, around leadership development, how they sort of come together. So once again, thank you so very much, Sonal, for having spared the time earlier and also today, in fact, giving us an opportunity to engage with you as well. So thank you very much and welcome to the panel discussion. You may be on mute, Sonal, if you're saying something.
Sorry. Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Anand, thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm looking forward for an enriching exchange of thoughts with this, set of people that are on the panel as well as in the audience. I'm sure that the learning is going to be two ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fantastic. So without much ado, let's get started. And maybe I think each of you can provide a little bit of a perspective around coaching as a professional yourself. You know, what has been your exposure to coaching? What is your perspective around coaching as you see it? And some of you have actually gone through some sort of a backgrounding within coaching itself. So maybe Mary, we'll start with you on this.
Sure. Thanks, Anand. For me, I think coaching is a very interesting power tool and one must have. It only helps you to look at what you are, what you need to learn further. And when I talk about learning and how coaching helps, for me, I think curiosity is superpower in today's world. And I'm always curious to learn what's out there. And if I were to really be successful, if I'm talking about as an L&D leader, I need to be out there first to see what is the business ask is and where do I look at building that capability, be it at leadership level or levels down. And when we speak of coaching, coaching happens in pockets. It's only looked at as a performance management tool, particularly in the industries I've been a part of so far. But that has changed now, right? It's a very interesting tool for the leaders to have somebody to help you reflect on. While we gain our expertise and we are successful in what we do, we also tend to forget to sit back, reflect on what I'm supposed to unlearn. Or how am I actually doing? What are things out there which I need to pick up? And that's where the coaching or the coach actually comes in play. And for us, I mean, the organization I'm in, we are pro-coaching. We are very progressive in what we do in the learning space, including the CEO himself. He's I think, a phenomenal learner himself. And that's where I think it gets instilled in us. For us to look at coaching for leaders, it was a very strategic thought. And for me personally, when I see coaching, I think it plays a very important role in one's development, not only from leadership perspective, not about how do you build strategies, but it's also how do you leverage your network, right? How do you build your network? When you're talking about, interacting with C-suite or the levels down, we only tend to go with an agenda we have in mind. We don't really go there to listen to what their problems are. And I think that's where our coaches have been playing a very critical role for us to make us think, see the blind spot that nobody has ever seen. And coaching also helps you be vulnerable in front of a coach, which we are afraid to do so as leaders usually. And I've been a coach myself. I've had some fantastic coaches in my life, and I give a lot of credit to what I've learned so far. It's also helped me to unlearn a few things and probably new learnings I've had from them. But when you speak of leadership coaching, I think everyone must have a coach in today's world. It's just not for the expertise what they bring, but how they help you to build your self-awareness about yourself as an individual, not only in your professional space, also in your personal space.
Fantastic.
I see it as a very powerful tool.
It's very interesting. You use the word unlearn multiple times, through this brief conversation itself. Of course, quite a few other keywords as well in terms of curiosity and being able to unravel the blind spots and being vulnerable. Very interesting. Sridevi, your perspective around coaching, again, maybe as a practitioner yourself, and then we'll get down into the organizational perspective also in a short while.
Sure. So, I'll start by saying that coaching is not a new practice, is it? It's been going on for a very long time. In your history books, you'll see kings who refers to Rajgurus who they go to for counsel, isn't it? And that's your coach. If you look at all your religious texts in Taoism and, in the Zen philosophy, you will find the Zen master who's the coach. You will find Mullah Nasruddin, who's also a coach. You have Krishna, who is Arjuna's coach in the Bhagavad Gita. And the point I'm trying to make is that coaching has been around for a very, very long time. It's just that it's gotten a new form and shape now. It's gotten formalized at this point of time. So all of us have been coaches to someone at some point of time, in formal and in formal ways. And we've had coaches in our lives, right? So my whole 2 cents on coaching is that you don't always have to seek it in the formal sense. You can also find coaches in your walk of life every single day. And that's what we kind of do. And the reason I say this is we're a young startup, right? We're a very young startup with a group of young people, and all of them in need of some form of coaching or the other. And we try to kind of find ways to do that. So the big question is, how do you kind of evolve coaching from where it used to be to where it needs to go, right? COVID has taught us that if you don't integrate mental well-being into your entire coaching strategy, I think it will fall through. I don't think it'll work. And Mary made a point, right? It was always about performance. And I'm saying it needs to kind of evolve beyond performance. The other thing is, how is technology going to kind of invade into this coaching space? It's never going to take the human out of the coaching formula, but how do you kind of integrate technology so that coaching is even more enriched? And last but not the least, and I say it all the time, and I said it to you in my first conversation, which is, how do you contextualize it to an organization, right? And I leave you with that thought and say that as a person who's been a coach in a very informal way, it's a hard job to do. And I have a lot of respect for all you folks on this call. People you coach are not easy, right? They're difficult. They believe they know what they know. And you have like quite a daunting task in front of you. So that's my
Thanks. Thanks, Sridevi. I think for that interesting perspective to look at the coaching being there as an instrument or as a vehicle pretty much from time immemorial, and how we've had to evolve it over a period of time. You did reference technology, and we'll come to that as well. We would like to probably seek your perspectives a little later on that, in terms of how do we integrate it and what does it actually mean for the organization, for the coachee, as well as for the coach. So we'll come to that. It's going to be an interesting conversation. So Sonal, maybe the same question to start us off from your own point of view, in terms of when did you get exposed to coaching for the first time? What has been your own experience having been exposed to that, and anything additional that you want to bring forth?
Sure. Like the other panelists mentioned, I see coaching as a very classic opportunity to either retrospect or, kind of reflect and also introspect, for that matter, on your behaviors, on your conduct, on your overall approach of leadership, etc. So this, I definitely look at coaching as an opportunity to reflect and introspect. I have been a coachee myself, and as a part of my corporate life sometime, maybe, a couple of years ago. And at the same time, I have been a coach to many other folks, formally, informally. I love the process because it actually allows you to open up, think about perspective beyond a particular setup that you are into. And rightly mentioned by Sridevi, it has to be very contextual. If coaches make things very contextual, you can actually captivate the audience, or you can actually captivate your coaching. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult, because I have seen both, and I'll be very honest and candid over here. I have seen coaches who have not been successful in doing the right coaching. And I have also seen very, very stalwart people who have done the best of it, even for tough nuts to crack. I mean, people need to have belief in that process. And many times people don't believe in that process. Why go far? When I was approached with a coaching concept, I thought that, do I really need it? Should I actually get into this process? Why is that I'm asked to, or why is that I'm feeling, why is that, the organization is saying that, you need to go for, or there is a coaching opportunity, and we will provide you coaches in terms of your development, in terms of you scaling up to the next level, etc. So I also had my own apprehensions, and I'm sure that people, when they are new to this entire gamut of things of coaching, they definitely have this question in mind: am I really wanting to get into this particular process? So being contextual, bringing that experience, driving those kind of thoughts, giving the space for a person to focus and allowing him to be, kind of open up to think beyond the obvious is something which I see coaching as a process, and it is successful only when it is contextual.
Okay. I think both of you referenced, thank you very much, Sonal. You and Sridevi both touched upon this idea of contextualization. What would that mean? If you want to just elaborate on that, maybe Sonal, I'll get started with you yourself. Would that be more an industry perspective? What is the specific that you would be looking at when you consider contextualization? What would it be that would land better on the coaches?
Sure. I'm talking from the perspective of role-specific coaching. Okay. And predominantly throughout my 25 years of experience, I have been working with technology organizations. And by virtue of that, I have been dealing with a lot of tech leaders. Very hard to, kind of get tech leaders, stalwart leaders to understand the impact of coaching or the benefits that coaching brings in. And that's where I say it has to be contextual. I mean, many, and I do not know how many of them are into the technology areas and how many of them deal, probably most of them. But the technology leaders always have this kind of internal feeling that we are good at what we are doing and this is how we run our show. The behavioral aspects, the human skills, the coaching skills are always, are always something which are either not on their priority list or they're last in the priority list. They don't understand that there can be a benefit when you actually go through this entire coaching process. But if you go and talk philosophical things to them and try to think about life coaches, etc., and then if you don't become contextual as to, okay, what are you doing right today? What is that you aspire to be? And how is that you can actually, be a catalyst in getting leaders like yourself created for the organization, especially in the tech world. I think that concept has to come very clearly. The context has to be set very clearly. Only then they will actually be a part of the process. Otherwise, it's very difficult, especially for the tech leaders. And that's the challenge that I have seen throughout my, career. And there are people who have come out of that. When you do the first kind of a coaching session and you build that kind of a rapport, or you build that kind of a connection where you say that, there is merit in doing coaching or getting involved in the process of coaching. And then it has went on smoothly. But initially there were always apprehensions. And that's why I say that it has to be contextual.
Okay. Okay. So the contextual is specific to the context in which they operate, the organizational context, the industry context, the specific challenges that they might be really faced with in their roles and so on and so forth. Yeah. So that kind of, in some sense, I think leads me to the next question. And maybe I'll ask you, Sridevi, when you think about your business partners, because I would presume that you partner with your businesses in all of these areas, how much are they bought into this? Sonal provided a perspective specifically around the tech leaders. If you sort of extend that across the continuum, and you also worked with multiple organizations, so you can probably take that whole as a sample itself. How much typically are they bought into the value of coaching from your point of view?
Okay. So I think it differs based on who you're speaking to, right? Like we currently have a coaching assignment going on in the organization, and this person has been very open to the whole idea of coaching. That said, let me take the organization that I'm in, right? We're a startup, and since we're a startup, there's hustle all the time. And if you sit a tech leader down and you tell him that, hey, we are a SaaS-based product organization where every minute counts as money for us, right? That's where money comes from. And then you tell him that you have to come out for this intense coaching session where you need to give me 4 hours a week, you lose them right there, right? So which is where I think I go back to Sonal's piece of contextualizing. What she said from a role perspective, contextualize how these places work. So I think the beauty of it will be when you're able to kind of sell it to them and help them understand that this is not going to get in the way of your work. I think that's the first thing you need to be able to sell to various business partners, because everything's about the hustle in a place like ours. So we have to be very cognizant of that. My organization, we are reasonably fortunate because we have a very supportive leadership team, which does believe in it. Again, it needs to be short and sweet and not long drawn. I will lose my audience if it ends up being a long drawn coaching conversation. So that's where we are.
Okay. Okay. So it's really about making sure that they are in fact sold a little bit in terms of its relevance and in terms of the real value, tangible value that will happen to them, right? How does it enable them to get perhaps to be able to meet their goals and the performance outcomes?
Yes.
Fantastic. So Mary, maybe taking it further, do you see a lot of coaching integrated into your leadership development programs and the journeys that you typically build? And typically, what has been the impact on some of the participants, if you have anything to share around that?
Sure. First, I want to build on what Sridevi and Sonal have spoken about the contextualized, right? I can share an example. When we started coaching, as I mentioned, it came from a strat meet we had for sales group. We started coaching for the sales leaders. And for sales leaders, time is money. And I work exclusively with the tech world, the data and analytics leaders. It's very difficult to get them down even for 30 minutes to have the conversation with a coach. So when you're talking about building, especially coaching or any program, the first thing we do is we look at the why part and why now. If that is missing, you're not selling the program or even whatever you're trying to build, right? So if I were to be, I'm a sales leader, if I were to spend 30 minutes with the coach, I really need to know why are we doing this? And what is in it for me from the organization perspective, as well as an individual? Why are you looking at it now? And why is it coming in my role? Am I supposed to invest so much? Is it mandatory for me? And what am I supposed to do after this? So when we design a program, it's easy for us to put a structure to it, but we work very closely with the senior stakeholders because they are the sponsors for it. We also look for champions and sponsors. Before even we kick off, the context is set by the senior stakeholder who's asked for the business. This ask is coming from a sales leader. We expect the senior most stakeholder to actually come and set the context, let them know the why and the why now part of it. And after this, what happens? They need to see the entire 360 view of what's going to happen. That's how we contextualize it first. And whatever programs we've been designing so far, especially if it is for senior leaders or VP and above, we make sure the coaching is part of that program itself. We can do multiple master classes, but you cannot just learn anything in just one 8-hour program or a 4-hour program. They need to have a continuous momentum to it, right? That's where the coaching comes in. So when we build programs for the sales leaders or the consulting leaders, particularly I lead L&D for the consulting teams, it's not an easy game because we are talking about technology which is ever evolving constantly, right? And you're in front of leaders. You are selling the transformation journey. It's a big change for them. But are you as a leader, are you even aware to talk about the changes they are going to face once you transform their business or modernize their business, right? And the coaching piece comes in this area for the leaders to look at when you're interacting with a client or positioning or making a sales pitch. Do you have the full context of how you're going to solve their problems? And that's where the coaching leader helps them identify that it's just not about you making a pitch or taking them through a transformation journey in terms of technology or whatever you're trying to sell, but it is about the changes which they would have to face as an organization, as a team, and how the change is going to impact. That's the journey you need to actually pitch or talk about. And while you're doing that, we also need to be the thought leaders. But when you're working with the tech leaders, as Sonal was referring to, we are phenomenally good at selling these pitches. We have great pages we present, and we are talking about every possible technology, but sometimes we miss the bus to listen to what the client has to say. And that's where the listening plays a very important role. Are you listening to reply? Are you listening to actually, not solve their problem, but probably, bring your thought leadership instead of being a thought tellership there. You don't want to always tell, right? As a thought leader, you need to ask questions, and the right questions, which will be thought-provoking for the client to even take a step back and think, am I doing the right one? Is this the right technology? Is this the right way to go for us? And that's where we see the coaches play a very critical role. We have amazing sales coaches we've brought in for the sales, leaders. And their focus was only to understand the strategy we have as an organization. Are they able to help them build the strategy? Are they able to position the strategy we have? That's the first part of it. And then the second part is where we talk about the executive relationship building, that we have different coaches for that. Executive relationship building is very different to making a sales pitch. Selling, you can do it, but building an executive relationship with a CXO or a C-suite is very difficult to have. And that's why we've brought in coaches, particularly who are in that space. So expertise for the coaches play a very critical role. And every leadership program so far we've designed, we have the element of coaching, and we bring the experts from the outside, because they bring the outside in perspective.
So this is by and large, what you're saying is related to potential transformation that they have to go through to elevate themselves to generate value for the client. And in the process, you're really looking at specialized areas, selling, building relationships, and so on, which interestingly then speaks to the need to build niches from a coach's perspective, right? A coach cannot be everything for everybody. So a relationship coach versus a sales coach versus some other area of niche. So maybe I want to probe that a little bit with you, Sonal. What is your perspective around the expectations from a coach and the kind of niche that they have to build for themselves? How does it actually play into your ability to sell that value proposition to the business partners?
In my experience, what I have seen is when you get a coach who has that kind of an industry or a domain expertise, but who continues to be a coach and doesn't step into being a mentor, is something which is very important. So if you are from the same field, many a times you try providing solutions. That's not what coaching is all about, right? Coaching is about facilitating the entire thought process of the coachee to ensure that he understands what he or she is supposed to do. You are just triggering, you are helping him to navigate through that journey. So we also have seen challenges with people who are very niche in that particular area. Let's say sales, or let's say tech, or let's say, pharma related stuff, or many other kind of, you pick up any domain and you will have a coach in that particular domain. But the danger that I see, and I have seen in my past organization, is when you are from that domain, you tend to get into mentoring space rather than coaching space. That should never happen. So that's very critical. And in my opinion, the way we talk about how coaching is going to help, especially in my world of tech, tech leadership that we work with, is more this level of people. They're so engrossed in their day-to-day and chaotic kind of schedules that for them every minute it is about coding, it is about infrastructure, it is about a lot of other things, strategic priorities that they have to focus on. There is very little chance or an opportunity do they get in order to sit back, relax, and kind of introspect or tune themselves to get to the next level. If you give that kind of perspective to them and tell them that, okay, the coach is not a life coach, but the coach comes with an experience from your own field, but he is the one who will help you to navigate and ask you right questions, which will enable you to think beyond the obvious, get to the next level of leadership, and also inculcate this culture of coaching within his own team. Because tech leaders are expected to be catalyst and driving the same kind of expertise within the organization. But that's truly not happening because they're so engaged, so focused in their work that they help people to, kind of solve problems for that moment. But nobody thinks that, okay, I have to create many more clones like myself. And how do I do that? Right. And therefore, the coaching piece becomes very important. Having a coach coming from that domain helps for this specific sector of people. Like what like what Mary said, if you are talking to salespeople, and if a person comes as a coach who might have a lot of experience, and probably many coaches today have diversified domain expertise themselves, and then they get into the coaching as a profession, right? So they bring that kind of intelligence as well. But when you talk about somebody who is a hard nut to crack, who doesn't believe in this entire process, but you put your first step saying that he comes from your expertise, he has done what you have been doing for years together, and then you put that particular proposal, it has worked for us.
So it opens the door in some way and makes the coach relatable
Correct.
to the targeted coachee in some way. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. The only thing is that he should not get into the mentoring
side
and provide solutions.
Maybe I want to combine the perspectives of Mary and what Sonal said, and Sridevi probably kind of ask you this question. How do you balance this? On one side, there is the need to have that expertise and the niche, which is really in some sense maybe allowing contextualization, allowing the relatability to the individual that is getting coached. On the other hand, what Sonal spoke about, I think the balance of coaching versus mentoring. How do you work on both both of these? How do you balance this dimension, the need for contextualization and expertise versus the need to balance between coaching and mentoring?
Sure. So I think the question is not how do you balance off mentoring and coaching. I think we have to go back to the larger question of why you're doing what you're doing, right? So one of the things that I've seen is a lot of people seem to think that coaching is a very default remedy to various problems you have within an organization, and I differ, right? I'm saying not everything needs a larger than life coaching intervention to really solve, right? I'll give you a classic example of something where we've combined mentoring expertise through coaches internally, and we are now looking at solving the other problem from coaches externally, right? So let me kind of talk to you about it. So as I said, we're a startup, and a startup is a mad place. And I'm sure many of you here have probably partnered with startups in some form or the other. But looking at a startup from the outside is very different from actually being in one, because the chaos that surrounds you, you get very used to it at some point, and you start finding solutions to really work with the chaos, and you're comfortable with the passe solutions because you need to kind of get through that particular day on that day. So we did an entire reorg of our product organization. So we are a product-based SaaS organization, right? So we did a reorg of our product organization, which was about 250 odd people. The way we went about it was we had the head of the product organization do the reorg. And then we realized that he's now created little organizations within his product organization, each of which need mentoring in a very specific way. And that, I believe, can only come from someone who knows the industry and the technology really, really well. And I can put my money down and tell you that any coach who steps in from the outside and says that I understand it it'll be hard for this person to fit in and try to solve that problem. It won't happen, right? So he kind of did the initial plug where he took them out on like a 3-day thing. He can't obviously coach 250 odd people, right? So he kind of created this little team under him. Each of them kind of took over a group of about 10, 15 people. They went away and they shut themselves into a location for about 4 continuous days, and they did this exercise, right? So it's partly training, mentoring, all of that went on. Now, the next piece of it was interesting. So I kind of went to that and I watched it. And then I received an email from him after all of that happened. And he said that, hey, I now need coaching for these X number of people who we need to really talk about. And I said, what do you need coaching on? So he said, hey, I need coaching on various things surrounding, what I think what Mary alluded to, which was about their connect with executive level interactions, right? Because they're all talking to, so since we are a SaaS-based lending product organization, our clients are banks, our clients, we often have interactions with the RBI. So he said they don't know how to really connect with these individuals because these are hardcore tech guys, and then they're talking to a completely different animal, which is highly regulated, right? So our mentoring piece took place internally. It was absolutely required, but our coaching piece, I'm probably going to have to do from someone outside. Yet, I will still look for a person who is from the banking space and who is from that who understands, that space really well. I can't have a generic coach kind of step in. So I think that's probably one way to look at balancing this off.
I think that's a fantastic perspective. So you do need the niche, you do need the expertise, you do need the context. And to a great extent, you try and leverage the internal people for mentoring, while the external coaches, I think, come and provide a different sort of a value to that. Sonal, you briefly alluded to building coaches within the organization, something to that effect. What do you think is required to be able to build an organization where coaching becomes part of the culture itself, if you will? Of course, you still will use the external coaches, but you're also trying to build coaching as a mechanism, as a hat that the leaders have to wear at appropriate points in time. Typically, what's been your approach? What's your perspective around that? The need for building a coaching culture within the organization.
So needless to say that it will bring a lot of merit when you have coaches internally within the organization. But there are some people who are early adopters in this process. There are some leaders who innately feel that they have that capacity, capability, and also inclination towards becoming coaches. So that is one. So you identify them and make a group of your early adopters. That's what we have done when I was with L&T Infotech. I did that. where we actually we did a lot of coaching, leadership series of programs, flagship programs, etc. And then we identified who are those people who can be spokesperson for us when coaching has to become the DNA of the organization. So we picked a handful of them. We had a very focused discussion with them and gave them the perspective as to how it has to be a multifold effect. We cannot, it's very difficult for us to every time get coaches from external world, right? Also, because you want to develop the DNA within the organization, you need people who have been in the organization for many, many years. And L&T Infotech is a classic example wherein people are there for 25 years, 30 years, 35 years, and so on and so forth. And they bring a lot of tacit knowledge. And if they can percolate that to the next generation, it will be very useful, right? So early adopter was a concept that we picked up. Then they were also trained. They also went through a very extensive training kind of a process internally through the people who were certified as coaches. And then we put them into different slots where they started practicing this. When many a times the juniors or the next level leader saw that, oh, my own boss in some or the other form is a coach to some other peer of mine in some other segment or business unit. And that kind of discussions really evolved and helped people to make make a decision that it's worthwhile to select a few of such kind of leaders. I wouldn't say that everybody is a coach, if I may use the word material. It cannot be. Everybody cannot be a coach. You definitely need to identify certain elements of coaching, and you should see that that is the way the person kind of carries him and kind of does that in his way of work that he does with his teams or organizations. So we identified that and started creating the culture. Same goes over here in all the other organizations that I have been working, creating that kind of spiral wind of more and more coaches from the internal teams and really making them really good at the coaching as a practice, which they were not earlier. Probably they had inclination. That is something which has worked.
Okay. There's an interesting question. It says from Raman Agarwal. When you bring in external coaches, does it mean there is lack of internal coaches for the purpose of specific coaching? Mary, maybe you can actually answer that. Your perspective.
Yes, I partly agree with the question. You're right. We do not have that expertise within the organization, or neither do we have, even though we might have coaches, let's say some of the sales leaders can play the role of coaches, but that's not what they are hired for. They can probably do it for one or two people, but that is not their full-time job, right? So that's where we kind of really bring in the external coaches who can spend the time.
Where's what I couldn't find it. The what is.
Did somebody
Dr.
have
Winston?
something to say?
No, go ahead. Okay, no worries.
Right. So that's where we bring the external coaches. And the example I can take is I'm currently working with an external coach. The program is called High Impact Relationship Building. Like I mentioned, this is about breaking and working very closely with the conversations with the C-suite. Now, when we started off this program, everybody thought, I interact with the C-suite all the time. So what is the big deal? Why do I need this program? But when we started off with the masterclass, it was a revelation for us also. The leaders actually paused and they kind of said, okay, you know what? This was a big challenge. I never realized that I was really shy interacting with a senior leader or even leveraging the leader's network itself. So the expertise might not be there with everyone all the time. And that's where the need for the external coaches
comes in. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. We also tend to keep most of these coaching sessions domain or industry agnostic, because I'm not looking for you to come in, bring the domain expertise. If I need a domain expert or a tech expert, we have phenomenal folks within the organization. That's where we create the communities of practice where the leaders kind of spend time with the folks who are really interested in learning that particular technology or build their capability in that space. Having said that, we also, the external coaches we work with, we leverage their network as well. So currently, with Gen AI coming in, it changed a lot of offerings we have in the tech space. So now we're looking for tech experts in the coaching industry. So it's just not the sales coach, but somebody who's done sales or consulting in the tech world. It's very different than you doing.
Very specialized.
Very specialized. So we have tapped into their network and we said, okay, you know what, you bring in your next 30, 40 coaches who are in your cohort or in your network, bring them, and we would leverage their expertise. Somebody's worked in the tech industry and also knows the particular domain, who's done the offerings or positioning of the offerings in the tech world, right? So that's where the combination, it plays out very beautifully when you bring in different experts, but then the need for the external coach is never going out. Trust me, it's there. It's only going to boom further, because I see a lot of organizations see the need for coaching in their respective spaces, at least in pockets, including the senior leaders looking for coaches. So
okay. I think one of you may have used the term generic coach, and there was a question in terms of what did you imply when you called out a generic coach? Because a lot of conversation has been about is been in the area of specialization and contextualizing and all that. Is there anybody that you see as somebody that is generic enough and that's come to you and you've not necessarily seen any value coming out of that? Is that something that you've seen in the coaching circles?
I don't know. I haven't used it, but I've not seen a coach who doesn't have a certain expertise. If you're talking
Some sort
about,
of a niche, yeah.
yeah, everybody has their niche. And when we are exploring for a coach, or we're looking for coaches, we look for that specific niche experience within the coach. So for ERB, we were looking with somebody who has worked with the CXOs, they bring in their own network, and also somebody who's been in a CEO or an ex-CEO or an ex-CFO, who's worked with big corporates, has that kind of experience, can come in. So I'm really not sure if there is a concept of generic coaching.
Generic
Probably,
coach. Okay.
It's you want to build your communication skills. You're still looking for a communication coach there, aren't you? So yeah,
Let's, I think, slowly move from, I think, the area of individual coaching to team and group coaching, especially with the need, I think, to build a lot of so-called high performance teams and organizations, and potentially the dynamics that exist within the players within the team and so on. Typically, this is another vehicle that is being used, the idea of team coaching. How much do you see application of some of that? Maybe Sridevi, I'll get started with you and then go over to others. Especially because yours is a startup, and it's likely that people may have come together with different expertise, experience, different expectations, or what have you. So is there a niche that you see, or is there an application that you see of team coaching itself?
So is there a niche I see and a need? I totally think there is. I think team coaching is necessary. I'm just wondering if team coaching can be dealt with in the same way as we do all other forms of coaching, right? I think team coaching needs to be absolutely specific. It might also border some form of mentoring. I'm not sure you can do team coaching to address. Let me give you, and go back to the example of where we did the reorg of our product organization, a part of the product organization. They all were suddenly in new groups, right? So some of them were in product design, another one was in implementation, so on and so forth. I think there was a very specific problem that we were trying to address, and that problem was one of how do you kind of make that change in mindset when you're moving from a product design role to, say, a product implementation role, right? There is an entire group of people who are moving to that. So you got to help them through that change process. So we do need that. Now, what happens is, again, it goes back to that same old question of, would I rather hear from someone who understands my reality really, really well, or do I want to hear from a coach on the outside who knows our reality, or says they know my reality? So my preference for team coaching, I think, would be a combination of an external and an internal coach working together. I am not sure I would be comfortable handing over my entire team coaching to an external coach, just the way it is.
Unmute. Yeah, Sonal, your perspective around the relevance of team and group, slight nuances within that, but nevertheless, what's your perspective around the relevance that you see within your environment?
So team coaching definitely is picking up in many industries and many corporate organizations. That's because the bonding between the teams, the collaboration that is required, the spirit of team players, and when we talk in technology world of having full stack kind of people, that full stack kind of people will come when there is exchange of thoughts, clear indications of what is the role of a person in that particular team, and then understanding the strength, weaknesses, and then collaborating. Therefore, it is definitely getting popular. Whether we have a mechanism of doing it rightly, or we have the capability of doing it internally all the way through, need not be the case. And therefore, that external help is definitely required. So the overarching team spirit and what you have to seamlessly look at in order to deliver something for your customer could be done through external coaches. But the internal spirit of understanding what are the strengths and the weaknesses, etc., probably the team leader or a VP level person or an executive leader of that particular group can decide and make those kind of decisions. But a combination of this will definitely work, and team coaching is definitely picking up.
So combination of internal and external people, internal and external coaches, in terms of having some clear differentiation of what each one would really look at. And you see that
Also,
picking
when
up.
Also when you see, when you have flavors of inputs coming to you, if your boss or if your line manager is continuing to coach you versus an external person who comes and gives an overarching dope of what that team spirit has to be, there is a difference that occurs, right? And therefore the combination works well.
And that's precisely where, in some sense, I think the team coaching comes in as well. As a person outside that circle, if you will,
Correct.
may probably end up seeing some patterns that somebody internal may or may not see in terms of their interactions and the interfaces they have with each other and so on. So the interpersonal dynamics of sorts, if there's anything that is suboptimal in that, being able to sense it and being able to look at it is one of the areas where an external team coach might have a view, a bird's eye view, if you will.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I want to now go into one of the points that Sridevi alluded to earlier, the adoption of technology in different aspects of businesses and therefore in the area of coaching as well. So maybe since you alluded to that, Sridevi, I want to maybe get started with you in terms of what is your own perspective around adoption of coaching or adoption of technology or integration of technology in the coaching space.
So I think the possibilities are endless, right? But let's keep in mind that this is not, by removing the human connect there. I want to make sure that I'm very clear that the human connect of coaching continues to stay, because that brings a very, very, very interesting connect. I'm alluding to aspects like, how do you use data to gather further insights about your coaching journey, right? So, for example, can we talk about, especially if you were to do something like a team coaching, you have like a set of like some 20 odd people. And how do you kind of use data analytics very, very specifically to kind of run assessments of sorts? How do you kind of bring in insights on effectiveness of your coaching? That's one. I was talking to a friend of mine who said that there's an organization which is actually creating VRs, virtual reality environment and rooms for people to simulate a coaching experience, right? So what happens with the coaches, you help the person reflect, the person goes through that journey, and then you trust them to kind of do what they do after you've left the picture, right? You've had that 2-hour conversation, you've left. And when you meet them the next time, you ask them that, hey, so, were you able to apply it? Did you do something about it? How did it go for you? Now, what we can do with this whole VR piece is that people can actually sit with the coach and they can view how that person is interacting with that other person and applying coaching lessons. The last but not the least, we're already using technology in coaching, aren't we? We are using assessments. We are using 360-degree feedback. It's not as if it's new, but I'm just saying more of that might be called for at this point of time. And this is probably very new for me and actually something that I've been learning over a period of time, because I currently work with a manager who's extremely data centric, and I've learned to kind of move a lot of my work and talk data when I have conversations in my space. So that's where I'm coming from.
So use technology where you're looking at the rational realm and where data is required. Use the human where emotions are involved in some way. So bring in the combination of that.
Absolutely,
Mary,
right.
Thank you.
And I'll just one other thing, like I think it was Mary who said that you're talking to a salesperson, right? They hate philosophies. They hate it when someone sits there and tries to lecture them. So you might be better off talking to them about some very, very, very solid specifics, and that's where data might come in. And same with the guy, like we have a data team, which is headed by this gentleman who speaks only data every single morning. So imagine if I was to sit down with him and start philosophizing, he would be looking for ways to authenticate what I say. And that's where I'm saying, that we might want to start looking at data for insights?
We use a lot of data. Even the sales coaches who work with us, they actually speak on those languages. Otherwise, people will get really bored. And keeping them engaged for 30 minutes is very difficult if you don't really speak relevance, speak their language, right? It's going to be challenging. So yes, we do use a lot of data point specific. What are your areas of opportunities while you're doing great, phenomenal? The data speaks. They work with us very closely with L&D leaders, get the data right when they're doing one-on-one coaching. And they also make them reflect. We also have tools which we use during the coaching sessions. So for sales leaders, especially the high pot leaders we are talking about, they're all measured on the number of bookings they make, the number of sales they make, the number of pitches they've made, right? So let's say last year last quarter, you had 10 conversations. How many of those conversations have translated actually into a deal coming in and how big the deal was? Right? Everything gets monitored. After every quarter, they go back, we look at those numbers and we say, hey, this is how your performance was for your particular team, and this is where your team stands, and these are your ratings currently. So based on those, now you go back to your coach and say, okay, this is how I've done. Out of 10 conversations I've had last quarter, 2 have actually translated into a new account for me, which is great if you ask me. But what happened to those 8 conversations? Right? So we ask them to go back, assess, evaluate, come back with their own assessment and present it to the coach saying that these are some of the things I could have done better. This is where I'm stuck. It doesn't always have to be the sales leader's concern. It could be something else which fell through and the conversation never went anywhere, right? So how can the coach help there is what the coach's job is. That's how we do coaching when it comes to sales or the higher program. Technology is very interesting. I'm fascinated by it, Anand. I think I've spoken to you about it, how technology plays. There are a lot of players in the market currently. I've evaluated at least in the last quarter who've done a great job in building coaching apps. Okay, this is not for the senior most leaders in the game, but this is more to do with the millennials or the Gen Zs, Gen Ys of the world, right? So they're very different breed. They're on the go. They want answers immediately. Example, if I were to make bisibeli bath, I don't know how to make it. For me, Google is the best answer. YouTube is the best answer. That's my life today. And that's where I live. So recently I was kind of working with, rather evaluating a partner who's created a great app using conversational AI as the premise. All right, they start with an assessment. It's a mental agility assessment, basically, which assesses a participant on it. And once you get onto it, it will give you there are 3 different pillars. They primarily help an organization look at how your employees are currently doing. It doesn't, as an organization, we do not want to see an individual's response in that. We want to look at, like Sridevi mentioned, the data and insights of how one individual is using that app is what we want to look at. What kind of questions are coming out? So this particular app actually focuses on the most buzzworthy word in the last 3 years. Everybody's talking about resilience, right? I think it's most abused word today, if you ask me. But that particular app is actually focused on that. How are you building resilience? What are your current challenges, right? That's one. The second one is it also helps you ask questions and navigate your career. If you're somebody who's just started your career, how do I build my career? Who are the right people I need to approach? How can I have difficult conversations when I'm struggling with multiple projects on my hand? So that's the second part. The third one is about performance. So these are the 3 different aspects the app actually is focused on. And it's very interesting to see. And it's all conversational AI. It doesn't give you solutions, but it will probe you in a way to help you reflect. All right. Example, I'm struggling with a manager constantly giving me projects. I'm already, working more than so many hours I'm expected to. And my manager keeps adding work, right? Now the coaching app will not tell you, oh, probably you need to work on your prioritization. It doesn't tell you that. It will tell you, did you have a conversation with your manager? Did you tell them that what's your current workload? All right. The answer is no, I haven't. So the next question would be a leading question here. And that's how the app is built. So it will continuously keep asking you questions till you get multiple solutions. It also has some very interesting games on it. A few assessments, very interesting questionnaire. That's how the app is built. We were planning to do a POC with them, provided they clear the GDPR guidelines, because there's a lot of data which goes into that particular app and we don't want to risk it. But yeah, technology is coming up. There are a lot of applications which are getting built in the coaching space. This is just one of them I was evaluating. There are much more, I think many more. We just have to wait and watch how they are going to change the game of
Le-
coaching. But the human aspect is never going away, Anand.
Yeah, no, in fact, that's what I wanted to build on. So there is obviously one is, of course, the human and the technology, being able to differentiate the dimensions itself. The other
Yes.
thing, a big part of our conversation, if you've looked at it, we've in a sense ended up conversing about performance-based coaching, right? It's really about getting business outcomes, be it in the sales side or be it in any of the other side, using data to really be able to strike a deal or finish it and so on. And yet, they are also people leaders, aren't they? So they are
Yes.
in some sense building the next generation of leaders themselves. How could coaching play a part in helping them out, enabling them out in that endeavor? And what do you feel is the role of coaching in that space as people leaders, building the next generation of leaders themselves? Maybe
Good
Sonal, I'll
question.
address it to you.
Sure. So, see, it's a very common problem that most of the organizations are hit with, of building their people leaders to the next level. And that means that, if they really want to transition to the next level, then how do they actually ensure that they are creating, similar kind of portfolios with others within their teams, right? Now, many a times that personalized coaching, and therefore there was one question which I happened to see, whether it has to be push or it has to be pull.
Yeah.
Coaching practice has to be a push or a pull. You know, it cannot be push, but it can be directive. So for example, when your development cards come during the organizations, I mean, talent management leaders would understand this, that we speak about where does the entire talent landscape reside at this point in time. Okay, if it is year 2023, what are the pockets in which our talent actually resides into, what kind of competencies and skills are required? And one of the things that iteratively comes again and again is that people leaders need to be developed in order to create more people leaders or a very strong teams. And for this, it's very important for us to have a very specific coaching. These days, organizations are also coming with a plan that coaching, as the fundamental level of coaching, has to be across the organization. As soon as you enter into the organization, there is some some element of coaching that has to go, and that is like not building the talent capability. It's more about the entire DNA of the organization has to be that they're coached to operate in an environment in which they are entering into. So if it is L&T Infotech, or it is Pfizer as an organization, Mastercard as an organization, that the organization has an ecosystem. In order to operate successfully and enter into this ecosystem, there has to be a benchmark set when it comes to coaching practice. So that is also a philosophy where the organizations are tuning to. The second important piece is coming back to this people leadership. It's very important for us to have very dedicated kind of stuff with them, and also direct them that this is where you're good at, and that's what development cards actually talk about. And if you really have to percolate yourself to the next role, then you also need to have build your own kind of battalion troops so that you can actually go to the next. Importantly, on this point, I also want to say that transformational leadership, or people who are going to transition from one role to the next leadership role, or from one leadership in one particular segment to the next leadership, also needs a lot of coaching help. And that's where organizations actually go for external coaches. Transformative leadership.
Yeah. That's a very interesting point. And Sridevi, maybe I want to get a little perspective from a startup ecosystem perspective. As your current set of leaders are trying to build the next gen leaders within them. So it's not a lot in terms of volume, but you will probably still have a small group of people around that would need to be developed. How do you see coaching coming into play there, and what has been your experience, if any, on that area?
Okay. So I think the first thing that we have to remember with startups is our definition of leadership and people management is still evolving, right? We go through an incremental journey of change every single day. Today is not like yesterday, right? And there is a new challenge today which we need to solve for. So if you ask me, do I have a very standard guideline around what leadership really means in my organization? My answer is no. We are evolving it. We are putting it together as we go, right? So if you were to call an external coach, it's huge injustice to them, because we don't really have a very clear definition of leadership today, right? And you tell this person to go come and create magic within leadership, that I think is a very flawed idea. What they probably need at this point of time, which we have done, right, So at Lentra, what we've done is we've actually put together, and I worked on it with a whole bunch of leaders. We've actually put together what is called as a Lentra way of managing. So my first step is even doing a leadership development journey where I kind of take them through very pointed interventions on doing the Lentra way of managing. After I kind of deploy that and I take my we have 97 odd leaders between, whatever. After I take them through it, then I have to kind of assess the system to see how these people are deploying it and what the sound is, the sound bites are from associates and people like employees within the organization. Basis the sound bites is when I will probably start thinking about what is the next step for me and does this person need a second round of coaching. So in any young startup, coaches probably will only play a role when their leaders are kind of trying to set up the organization and they need direction, and that's right at the top. And for that, they have their own set of people that they go to, right? They're not going to go to a person that they don't know to seek advice on strategy. They will go to a person that they know very well to seek advice. So that's where we are from a startup perspective.
Okay. So a couple of other questions and comments. I think Debabrata has said, for coaching to be meaningful, the beneficiaries need to experience quick wins on their journey. How can these be incorporated? Is that what, Debabrata, your question is? You want to elaborate on that? Please feel free. Debabrata, you there? Okay. There's another question. I think you probably spoke to it, Sridevi, but maybe it's coming out of a little more curiosity. Usage of VR in coaching. Could you please elaborate with an example?
Yeah, I think it works wonderfully well. For example, when you have to do coaches in say delivering customer service, right? So I've been speaking to a friend who works in Verizon in the United States, and she was telling me that they have coaches for their people on the floor. And what they've done is they've created a virtual environment where they simulate what the customer undergoes as a part of experiencing empathy, for example, right? You keep saying empathy, but what people really experience when you have to kind of undergo empathy. So they've simulated an environment where the person actually has to go into the room and pretend to have a conversation sitting in front of them and actually delivering a message to them about why something can't happen. And they say that, they kind of, they built it in a way that people experience some of those emotions, so that's something that they're doing in the customer service space very, very strongly. I was interestingly watching I was watching like this series on Netflix, and I forget the name now. It was a while ago, where people said that, you live someone's life for a couple of days. So I want you to come in here and I want you to kind of experience this person's life. Yeah. And then you do coaching, right? It's lovely to kind of sit on the outside and says, I'm helping you introspect, but you don't have an understanding of what I really undergo. So an environment, right? So the environment is created where, for example, if you were to take my organization, any given person, like if you look at their calendar for meetings, it is chocker-blocked. It's double-blocked, right? It's hard to find like 20 minutes in the day. And, try to kind of tell that person that in every conversation, I want you to demonstrate empathy. They said, I don't have, they say, I don't have time to have my meal. So I'd love to demonstrate empathy, but where's the empathy for me when I have to kind of do that, right? So that's what I think places like VR help you.
VR can help do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think someone just I didn't read the whole message. Someone put it in there saying they've kind of done that.
Anita has mentioned, I've delivered the experience coaching to L'Oreal leaders in Paris. Yeah, absolutely. Any questions or any thoughts that you all have, panelists have, of the group of coaches here? Because they've had a very vast experience, I think, coaching a whole continuum of organizations and leaders as well. Anything that you think would be useful for you to know from them in general? Any questions that might come to your mind? I'm sort of playing the reverse here. Okay. Any questions from the coaches that you might want to ask? the panelists.
I would love to know what challenges you face when you actually start coaching or, meeting the corporates, when you even go make your pitch saying that this is your expertise and you would want to partner. Example, you're coming to Genpact. What challenges have you faced if you really, I know it's a very difficult task, but then maybe we could help you somewhere, but would love to know your challenges when you approach corporates.
Okay, so what are the top challenges that we could face, that we might face when we hit the corporates?
So I can ask a question here. Thanks,
go
Mary.
ahead.
I started coaching when I was in Toronto years ago. In year 2000, I was a coachee. And then in 2006, I became a coach. And then later on, of course, life got me back to India. And in 2010, nobody knew much about coaching. So that was quite a shocker for me. But today, we are having this conversation, and I'm absolutely delighted to see that organizations are moving in this particular direction. The direction that I feel that, coaches can be coaches, and we are taught to be coaches. This whole aspect of funneling into expertise rules out a lot of really good coaches, because I can coach anyone, and I have. Till this whole aspect of niche and expertise came on, I mean, it's 15 years now. I was an executive coach. I could coach anyone. And I did. And now I am told I can't coach this person or that person because you don't have this background or that particular background. And I'm thinking, you're a human being. You have feelings, you have expertise. I can work with you in any space that you want to, because in the end, it all comes down to the human being and to the beingness. And from that's where the transformation kicks off. And expertise and all these are what I call above the iceberg entry points. I think we need to see what is this person really want above the performance or the developing an expertise and leader, but who do you want this leader to be? And match a coach to the person who can bring that beingness and understanding the who. And that's where the transformation will come in. And then performance and everything just works its way up any which way, And that's all I can share with my experience. And if there is a way that one can balance the two, would be a very good idea, because people are spending a lot of time, effort, and money to become coaches. It's not cheap. And just renewing our credentials is $300 a year.
Yes.
We need organizations to support external coaches who have a lot of experience, and how can you leverage their experience both in terms of their, I would call, just business experience as opposed to an industry experience, and also their whole coaching expertise along with it. Then we are being fair to the profession.
I agree. Probably I'm just overshooting myself here. But then we work with coaches who bring the human aspect which you spoke of, right? Forget about the niche. If I'm looking for a sales coach, then that is a very specific ask I have. But we also work with coaches when I'm talking about the relationship building with CXOs. It's a very critical skill for leaders to have. That's your human capability, as we call it, our power skills, which is really undermined, if you ask me, but those are the most critical skills one must have as a leader in their team.
Indeed.
Right? So when we work with these coaches, we look at their ability to coach a leader, call spade a spade, because some leaders refuse to do that, right? And that's where the demonstrable behaviors or your power skills come in play. You as a coach, it's your expertise which actually helps them see that ability, hone their ability or those skills, like the empathy part. It's very difficult for us. We all speak of empathy, but it's very difficult to demonstrate in a certain situation unless I'm actually there, right? And that's where we look at your expertise. How do you bring me to see that particular aspect of that skill which is required for me to do or be good at? Example, leadership. We all assume leadership is only somebody, you're a leader only if you have a team reporting into you, which is not the truth, right? You as a coach, it's your responsibility to break the myth saying that you as an individual contributor are also a leader, because you work mostly with cross-functional teams where your leadership capabilities should be top-notch, because you are working with them asking them to do things, believe in you, in what you are presenting. And there is no team which is working for you there. You have to work with them and get the things done, right? And that's nothing but your leadership capability. That's where the coaches actually play an important role. I work with a lot of coaches, or I know a lot of coaches in my own network, and they do a phenomenal job building or helping the leaders hone their power skills, as we call it, the demonstrable behaviors, as we call it, right? And that is a big opportunity and space for the coaches who are coming out of ICF, who are certified, who spend so much money, even to keep up with this certificate for 3 years. That itself is a big deal. I am not a certified coach, but I'm an executive coach. I've been doing coaching for a lot of leaders myself. And nobody's ever asked me if I'm a certified ICF coach. They did not look at my credentials, but then definitely looked at my experience, right? If I'm coaching a VP who's 25 years plus experience in his respective space, he also has the respect for what I bring to the table, why he's looking at me for that particular session, right? What I bring and how I'm going to help. Probably my expertise there is to ask simple questions, make him think or her think, reflect on, where you're not able to see that you have that skill, but you've never used it, or also, build that space for them to be vulnerable in front of you. And that's where you can actually help them as a coach, right? Yeah,
Fantastic.
It's building your gravitas, especially when you're working with leaders. I am very confident when I'm presenting, but are you really questioning that I don't have gravitas? Now it's your job to tell me where I lack and what I'm supposed to do. And I think that's where coaches play a very important role. I've seen a lot of organizations really looking for coaches who can do that. That is, I work with Anand. He's done some of our leadership sessions, and Anand is right there bringing his expertise, right? It's domain agnostic. We're not looking for domain. We're not looking for any niche expertise, but the acumen he has, we want him to bring that and tell our leaders that this is what you need to see, which you're not seeing currently. And that's the outside in view also.
Yeah.
So
fantastic. So Shamik, I think you had raised your hand. You had a
Shamik,
question.
raised your hand.
First, thanks, Anita, for bringing up the question. I put it in the chat box. I, in fact, have 2 questions. One is this niche versus the generic thing specific to the tech world, or is it across the industries? That's one thing. And the second thing is it because of the resistance from the people within? If I'm a techie, I believe that I can only be coached by someone with that kind of domain expertise. Is that where it comes from? Or is a general belief that the guy, the coach without, or is it because there is a belief that the coach isn't good enough or expert enough to coach this person? So where is that coming from?
Should I take that, or Sridevi?
Yeah, maybe we'll go to Sridevi. Go ahead, Sridevi, and then maybe get a perspective from Sonal as well.
Yeah, Shamik, thank you for that question. So your question was specifically if this whole niche versus generic applies only to the tech world. Yeah. So let me put it this way, right? I think it's a little less about is it the tech world and is it more about the person that you're trying to coach, right? I think that's where it has. I don't think it has anything to do with the tech world. What happens is, and I think and I'm also going to address Anita's concern here. I think you have to appreciate that there is an entire persona a human being brings into an organization, which is about my expertise and what I do and what I excel at, right? And often that is about my capabilities in terms of my functional skills. And that's where most of the conversation is centered. So I'm also going back and connecting it back to another question which said quick wins. I'm not a big believer of quick wins. I think there are no quick wins in human interactions. I think it's a journey. It needs to go through it. That said, your connection with your connection with the person will be made if you're able to speak their language every once in a while, and they need to hear it. You might want to deny it and say that, I want to connect at a human level. I appreciate that. But please understand that when I'm in an organization, I have a persona as VP data analytics. You need to cut through that persona first before you hit the human being behind that persona. And that's where sometimes connecting at that very, that very functional level helps.
So it's the entry barrier that you're kind of taking care of.
The initial barrier. And once you kind of cut through that, right, I think they're all human beings who you can connect with. We're not saying you need to know how to code. But you need to know, for example, how a SaaS-based startup works. What drives our business is important for you to know. You can't come in there and say that I don't need to know that. You must know that, because that's the reality of that human being's life. That's what we're saying.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, if it's just about using the jargon and having
No,
a
it's
fair...
not about using the jargon.
Please hear me out.
Sure.
See, we're talking about someone being an expert in the field as against knowing how things work out there.
Yes.
So probably I shouldn't have used the word jargon. Having a reasonably good idea. Now, I'll give you an example from my this thing. I headed the operations of a product company. Now, I don't have a tech background, but it so happened that I oversaw the development team, and we hired IITs straight from college, etc. And one of the things which I realized is they have fantastic coding skills, but zero social skills. And every time I thought, and there were 3 functional groups in the organization, and the techies thought they were the God's gift to the world and the organization, and would sort of look down upon the testing team and the other life sciences. They were a support team. So I felt the need to get some sort of intervention in terms of developing the social skills. But there was tremendous resistance. They said, "Listen, I code and I do a brilliant job. I don't need soft skills at all."
Yeah.
So I mean, that's where I was coming from,
yeah.
Because there is this sense, just because I'm a brilliant coder, I've got it all covered and sorted. Okay, and I was wondering if that is the belief, that self-belief which drives people to say that, oh, if you are not you don't come from a tech background, then perhaps if you're a coach, it's not going to work for me. That's where my question was coming from.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people, and I bet you, if we were to be coached, right, as people who are leading these functions, if I was to be coached by a techie on a very tech subject, my belief would be that I'm a learning and development specialist, and you're telling me how, that learning how to code, and you're going to tell me how to do it. Don't tell me, right? So I think everyone kind of holds very close what they think they know best, and they come from that place. So you're absolutely right, Shamik. I think appreciate that their reality in the space that they are in right now is what drives their actions, and you need to kind of cut through that a little bit and then hit the person behind it.
It's the entry. I think removing the entry barrier and creating that initial connect, I think, and then slowly it thaws, and then the human being sort of shows up, and then all the other beautiful conversations can happen. But the entry point is where I think probably a lot of the resistance is. And
so it's not a line. So it's not a line drawn in sand. I mean, it depending upon the skills and competencies of the coach, you can still break the barrier and go across. Fair enough.
Absolutely.
Okay. There is hope. There is hope, I must say that.
There's always hope.
Okay, I think we're getting closer to the end of the conversation. Thank you. But Cherian, I think I see you've raised your hand. Please go ahead.
No, I think thanks for this session. I think it's very insightful to hear from the organizations. Just to give a little bit of background, I've been a coach now for the last 13 years, right, after a long corporate innings. So at least in the last 13 years, I have not focused on any niche. So right now, I'm coaching an MD in a consulting firm. I've coached a couple of senior directors in a tech firm. I've coached a managing partner in a financial services firm. So I think this whole domain thing is all a myth in my experience, because we are coaching a leader. We're coaching a leader in the context in which he or she is operating in. To me, the industry domain is really not important, because I don't need to be an industry expert to add value to the leader. Right? And that's my perspective, and that's been my experience. Second one, I think, is the fact that, I'm a business coach and for entrepreneurs, and I'm a coach for corporate leaders, right? So quite often I wear the cap of a coach and a mentor as applicable. Right? So I don't sort of follow the rules, I make my own rules in terms of what I think will work for the coachee and what is best for that individual in that organization, right? So sometimes I believe that many of the corporates, they don't give enough weightage to what the coach comes with. The coach has got a lot of experience. He or she is also a good judge in terms of what is best for that individual. Right? And quite often I find organizations prescribing how the coaching should happen, what goals the coach should work on, how many sessions should happen, how much time per session. And I find that very putting off as a coach, frankly. So I'm just sharing my experiences because I've been doing this now for 13 years. So nowadays I pick and choose my clients more than they picking and choosing me, because I've said no to many engagements where they said, we want only 6 sessions of 1 hour each. My coaching practice has been 10 sessions of 2.5 hours each. The big difference between 6 hours of coaching and 25 hours of coaching. Right. So I think that is where I think organizations and coaches should also have a more mature, equal kind of a relationship. Sometimes I find it fairly unequal in many instances. Just sharing my experience and not complaining.
So I want to end it. Thanks, Cherian, for bringing it up, and I want to maybe end it with a question to the panelists. Actually, do you all see any opportunities to collaborate from a chapter perspective? I think this is a very experienced group of coaches here with such diversity, like Cherian and Shamik and all of them that spoke about that. Do you see any opportunity in any form and shape, right, to exchange, to interact, to maybe demonstrate or bring in the awareness of what coaching might be versus what mentoring might be? Is there a value in that? Do you see any opportunities for us collectively to collaborate as a chapter, not as individuals, not as organizations, but as a coaching chapter here?
See, I see merit in doing that. I think I've, in our conversations, we kind of spoke about it, right? One, from whatever I've heard from the coaches, the challenges are very unique to each one of you, but there are also common challenges, right? Where, there's some amount of myth busting which is needed. That I think that's where you have to start, because the assumption also is that when coaches come, there is definitely a problem with my performance. That's why I've been asked to coach. But for all you know, that's not the case. It's for us to actually tap into your potential, which is unlocked or unleashed yet. That's where the coaches can actually help you see that potential of yours, which you haven't used so far or whatever, right? That's the specific part. I think you could definitely do some amount of myth busting. And I know a lot of you, I know the discussion was more with the IT world. So the questions were like, do we really need to have that expertise? Not really. At least when we are assessing coaches, or we're looking for coaches, we look at keeping it domain agnostic, industry agnostic, because your expertise in that particular area, if it is high impact relationship, it is what we want you to help our folks on. We would want to see your business expertise working with somebody at a CXO level, breaking their ego, breaking the barriers, breaking that facade we put up when we interact with somebody, right? Can you get past that and help me see what I can actually do and achieve? I think that's where coaches play a very critical role. So when you're positioning, probably it's just not about your domain or industry expertise at all, but what you bring to the table in terms of how you can help us solve this problem. Can you align with our culture or the environment we have folks in? Those are some of the things when you are doing the myth busting session can actually help you partner and do some amount of interactions with seniors. How do they see coaching as a benefit? Those
Thank
are
you.
some I can think.
Thanks, Mary, for in some sense, I think, summarizing the point of view from your point. So maybe I'll just request Sonal and Sridevi also to probably provide their concluding remarks. How would you conclude, Sonal? Maybe with you first and then go to Sridevi. Did we lose Sonal by any chance? So Sridevi, why don't you go ahead?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the specific question was, is there merit to actually working with a chapter like this? I totally think so, right? One, because one of the fears, and I'll speak about it like a leader who runs this function. One of the fears is always about aligning with a coach who you're afraid is not going to do a good job, right? Now, I do agree that not everything that you do at the workplace is really going to be the best. But finding a coach, building their credibility and telling them that this is going to align the problem. And when that fails, right, it's a huge reflection. Sometimes people kind of sit up and say that, I thought you told me that person was really good. So I think when you have chapters like this, you're fairly comforted that you have a good group of people who know what they're doing, right? So that totally helps. It's a lot of credible people who are sitting in this room and talking. So I think this helps us. Secondly, we have trouble finding people. And Anant, I think I told you this, right? LinkedIn is full of coaches. I don't know who is a good one and who is not. And I am afraid to personally pick coaches based on LinkedIn profiles and this little thing that they put up there. It's worrisome for me. So I'd rather work with chapters like this, where there are people who I know and who I can connect with. So I think there's huge value to really working with chapters.
So if we end with that positive note, thank you very much, Sridevi, for that vote of confidence. I think it really makes this chapter's, I think, journey worthwhile as well. The whole idea is we've all come together, right? We're all individuals in our own rights, maybe having our own organizations, coaches, facilitators, and yet there is also a common vision, a common direction of the chapter as well that we subscribe to. And so thank you very much for, I think, engaging us in this conversation and providing your very, very valuable perspectives. It's very useful. I'm sure it's points to ponder for us. And equally, maybe I think a couple of our points have, maybe got you thinking as well. And that was the whole idea of the session. So thank you once again very, very much. Taking your time off on a Friday, not just to you, but the members of the chapter. I think, as I said, extremely experienced, highly experienced, well-equipped, very knowledgeable group of people that's here who have actually played the roles and even continuing to play some of these corporate roles and completely identify with some of the challenges that you've spoken about. They're living that on a day in, day out basis themselves. So thank you one and all for I think doing this, and have a great weekend. Thank you so very much, all of you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely weekend. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.